I don't think there'll be a single person in this, in this space who hasn't dreamt about running a bookstore, being in a bookstore. So we have such a great panel with great stories. So we're going to just talk. We've discussed things at length, and we're going to talk about the joy and the magic of running a bookstore. The slight stresses of being an independent bookstore. We don't want to delve on it. We really want to talk about building communities of readers, running bookstores, and tell you inspiring stories of what we do each day. For me, it's history. It's not something that I've done in the recent past, but it's something I've always loved. So a little bit about me. I grew up over a printing press. Books have been in my life forever. So I ran a bookstore, 20 something years ago in Bangalore. We just moved here to Bangalore. I knew nobody, and I set up a bookstore. And today, looking back at life in Bangalore, all the people, all the friends I have are from my bookstore, people I knew from the bookstore. It was great, it was challenging. It didn't last very long for me because I moved on to, working on the other side of bookselling, being an agent. But, this is something that I've always loved, so I was thrilled when BLF asked me to moderate a panel on bookshops. So I wanted to leave you with one story and then, pass it to my lovely panel to tell their stories about a bookstore. So in the 90s, I had a literary festival of writers from all over the world, all over India, but headlined by a wonderful writer called H.R.F. Keating. So Keating wrote these books with a character called Inspector Ghote. And Inspector Ghote was, based in Bombay, but Keating had never been to India. That was his first trip to India. So I said, okay, I'm going to build my Lit Fest around Keating and his trip because he was coming without a cost to me. And he came to the bookstore and there was not a single person in the shop, not one. And we were a brand new store. We were on Alsu Road. We had parking, no customers. So I called my wonderful husband and I said, bring your office and come. So he arrived with all his colleagues. And while we were waiting, Keating and I were talking, and I was trying to make small talk, which is something we all do very well. Selling books requires small talk. So I asked Keating, whether he'd like coffee. And he looked at my face and he said, don't worry, darling. I'm so used to the staff being the only people in the shop. So he'd brought rare editions of his books for me, which I still have. He'd brought chocolate for the staff. But fortunately, in about 10 minutes, the shop was full. And, the events in R&B was something that I didn't look back on. They were always full. But we all have our, before an event, no matter what, you're so worried that people won't come. You're so worried that the shop won't be full, that books won't sell for the writer. So it's not books that sell for us. I think it's books that sell for the writer. But that shop didn't last, and I'm so, so delighted to be here with, for people who run, brave people who run wonderful bookstores. So I'm going to start with talking to my friend Krishna Gowda, who runs the Bookworm in Bangalore. Church Street is a legend in itself. Everybody knows the Bookworm. And he's really going to talk about, building that culture of reading. He runs a bookstore that sells used books and new books. And I think we all love the store. People come to the store from other cities. And I'd love to hear Krishna's favorite stories.
That's a wonderful question. Thank you, Jayapriya. To keep the reading culture alive, we have a dedicated space in our bookworm, which is in Bangalore. There are so many book clubs. They are making use of it. Once in a month, they come and meet, discuss about the books. And we do a lot of events, book launches, book discussion, poetry reading. We did more than 20 children's storytelling activities. The most important thing is we take back the books which our customers bought. So we'll take back at 50%. They will get back store credit actually. So that's how we are attracting the. I mean, they are coming back to the books, and it's keep going. I think used bookstores play big roles in keeping the reading culture alive because most of the books will go out of print. So the only option is second-hand used books. So to keep the reading culture alive, used books are more important. That's my personal opinion.
And your favorite story in the bookstore? You have so many customers who come in.
Um, Maybe Sugata Srinivas Raju was here. So he used to tell me that when he was a child, his father used to leave him at the premier bookstores. So for a half day. So so after 20, 25 years, Srinivas Raju sir leaving his children in my shop, sir half day. So half day. So bookshops as a personal connection with the independent bookstores as a personal connection with their readers, their customers.
Thanks, Krishna. You know, Krishna sells himself short. His bookshop is always full. I'm sure he has many stories. But, you know, since we have no books to sign, we'll hang out somewhere after and you can chat with the booksellers. I wanted to, you know, we did have some time to talk before. So Leonard told me something quite interesting about his bookstore. So Leonard runs a bookstore in Goa, and he said that there's a really old bookstore on the same premises as his. But yet, because of Google Maps, people tend to find his bookstore, and I was really curious about that.
Yeah. So I'm from South Goa, and we have two bookshops in the same locality. And the other one is about 40 years old, so it's top of mind of many people. But we are on the top of Google listings. So whenever people search for bookshop in South Goa, we come up first. And what that has done is it has made us a tourist bookshop. Although we have a good collection of Goa books, although we have a good collection of children's books, it has made us a tourist bookshop. And it's nice to see people who come every year during a particular time of the year and say, we came here last year also. And last year, so just 2 days back, somebody came and said, the last time I came, I was settled in Bangalore. Now I'm settled in Chennai. Can you ship me books? Can you ship my books there? And it is very nice to know that people come back to bookshops, not only in their own cities, but also in other cities. You know, that bookshops have become places of, I won't say pilgrimage, but at least as destinations that what they would like to visit. You keep talking about bookshop crawls in places like London. I wish there were things like that in places like Bangalore, where there are so many bookshops, places like Bangalore, places like Delhi, because it encourages people to go and visit these bookshops, find books that they would never otherwise pick up, and develop that passion for reading.
That was really interesting. But you didn't tell us a favorite story.
I don't have favorite stories except that one time. I wasn't in the shop, but my colleague called me and said, "You know what? I think there is somebody who looks like Isterin Kirei who's entered the bookshop." And it turns out that Isterin Kirei's daughter is settled in Goa, and she comes to visit sometimes. And she came to the bookshop, and she found copies of her books and signed them. But yeah, that was something nice that happened to us, because otherwise we are quite celebrity free in that sense.
Stories don't have to be celebrated. But I did also want to tell, you know, like we've got two wonderful stories of two other bookstores, but I did want to talk, before I asked Radhika to tell us her story, you know, bookstores have had a really hard time in the recent past with the pandemic, and I did want to introduce this before I pass the mic to Radhika. As you know, everything was shut down. People were unable to ship books. Books were not considered an essential in our country. But that was a time when I noticed the really cool, interesting things using technology that bookstores used to not lose business. So Radhika did a couple of things that I was really interested by, and she runs Champaka, which is Bangalore's newest bookstore, much loved by everybody. And she also has a bookstore in Goa. So Radhika.
Thank you. I'm very happy to be here on this panel with people whose work I've admired all my life. So, thank you very much. So in the pandemic, I think Champaka was very young, and we had just about opened, and we didn't quite know what to do, how to pay salaries or get on with the business of book selling. So we launched a couple of new things. We did launch a subscription box where people could get books sent to their homes, curated by us. And later on in the year, we also launched a reading challenge, which has been very fun because people write to us from all over now telling us we're doing these books in the reading challenge, or we finished these, we haven't finished these, I can't find these, can you send me some? So some ways to keep people engaged and keep sending books to them. So that's been quite a lovely experience.
But also your favorite story. You can't escape that.
I think I have too many, and I'm so grateful and overwhelmed by the support that we've got from people and the community that's formed so quickly around us, not knowing anybody in this industry when we started. I think Ashti from Lightroom is here. She supported us initially quite a lot, and the relationships and the friendships that we made as we went along. I think just recently, last week, we had customers who came in, and we had a lecture series going on in the evening. So this customer came and drew the entire scene and left it for us at the store. And we have so many drawings of books and recommendations and people that are there on our board, and some people even take them. And I don't mind, and it's such a lovely exchange that's going on at the store with all our customers. So I thought I'd share that for now.
So this brings me to two things that we did discuss that haven't come up. And before I come to you, Rachna, we're going to save Rachna for last because she has the best story. She absolutely has the best story. But two things we talked about is a sort of influencing taste that Leonard talked about when we were, in the lounge. And the other thing was creating this community of readers because, so one hard truth here, there are lots of people in publishing. We're surrounded by the book trade. And everybody works so very, very hard, too hard. Nobody makes enough money. And I think the driving force behind the book trade is really a deep love for reading and books. We're only here because of that. Everything else is truly hard. There's not a week that I say, why am I doing what I do? Not one single week that I feel that everything's great and everything's wonderful. I always look back and say, oh my God, why am I doing this? Because in some way, it's really rewarding. It's very rich. It's very connected with people. So the book industry as a whole, it's two things. It's the world of words and people. Our relationships are deeply important, and I think we're driven pretty much by the relationships we make either with the book trade itself or with customers we see in the bookstore. So Leonard, I'd love to hear about how you think you can influence reading tastes with customers in your store.
I don't want it to suggest like, I'm imposing my tastes over the other, but being a bookshop with limited space, it's always a case of we do not have that book that you're looking for. And what we do is, because as a bookshop, we try not to follow the bestseller list. That's been our not motto, but it's been something that we try to curate, that every book in the bookshop needs to be justified. The presence of every book in the bookshop needs to be justified. So that ends up with many books not being there. And what that means is that when a person comes and asks for a certain kind of a book, we need to be able to say, but no, we don't have that book, we can get it for you. But in the meantime, why don't you try this author, or why don't you try this book? Because many times we've observed that book recommendations are peer-based. So my friend has read it, so I also want to read it. And sometimes that book is not something that person would enjoy, That's what bookstores do. They tell you what book to read, but often they tell you what book not to read because, that's not something that might go well, especially with children. They hear their friends talk about a particular book, they come, and then they see that's not what exactly they had in mind when they were asking for the book. So not influence, but, open them to a wider array of books. That there are other books out there, that there are authors they might not have heard of, genres they might not have heard of, and why don't you try this also, kind of thing.
So, Rachna, all yours. Till we talk about it. So, Rachna has the best life. She grew up in a bookstore. She grew up surrounded by books, and I think all of us have wanted to be her in some way. So, we'd love to hear your wonderful story.
I get to meet many of my fellow booksellers for the first time, so this is my reward for being here today. And I was telling them just prior to this that I grew up in a bookstore. I've had 53 years of being in a bookstore, being part of a bookstore. And for the longest time, I wanted to run away from that because I was like this bookshop kid. Like, for many years, I didn't even have a name. It was the bookshop kid. Then it was, hey, but your story is like, You Got Mail, if anyone remembers that film. Then I tried to run away from that. But in the last, I think, decade, I've just embraced all of it, and I'm happier because it's like my childhood was almost kind of a story that storybooks are written about. And it was magical in every way. It was privileged in every way. And I realized that a lot of how I think was just because I had access to books and I had access to people who bought books from my bookstore. You had the most wonderful conversations. You weren't restricted in the way you think. And I find that I am, as an adult, accepting of every single thought and person. That I have no bias. And that comes down to being raised inside a bookstore. And that's a huge privilege. My bookshop story, I'll tell you two, because there's so many. One time, this person walked into our bookstore. I think it must have been sometime in the mid-70s. He spent the entire day in the bookstore, and we're used to people coming and browsing and hanging about for hours, and which is lovely. But to actually spend the entire day is unusual. Anyway, he came, he left, he didn't look the least bit familiar to us. And then the next day, we read in the papers that Garcia Marquez was in town. And his event got cancelled. But he found this wonderful bookstore, and he spent the entire day there. We lost out on that, but it was lovely because we got to have lovely conversations with Garcia Marquez, and we didn't know who he was, and not for 1 minute did he even let on who he was. And it was a time like pre-internet, so we didn't really know what people look like. I think that has to be one of my favorites. The other is the best compliment I got ever at the bookstore, and I think nothing can ever top that. Some years ago, I met an old store customer, and she was with her now very grown-up kids, and I was like, this auntie, oh, how the kids have grown. It was quite nice. And the kids were really warm and affectionate, even though they were meeting me after many years. And I said, they're really wonderful. And this lady, without missing a beat, she says, you raised them as well. And I cannot top that.
That's a hard story to talk. So here we are, like I want to count myself as part of this panel because I do have a history with bookstores. But here are, a bunch of us who've absolutely adored what we do. But, I really wanted, before we threw it open for questions, to talk about how hard it is to run a bookstore. Every day is hard. Every day is is, getting books, not getting books, sometimes waiting for weeks, like, for a book to arrive in your store when you have an order. The paperwork that we do, the anxiety of sales, of being able to pay rent. And you can't go out and say, I'm going to set up a bookstore. I'll go buy all the books I need. Stock grows. You build stock. It takes years. It takes months. It's not something that's, an instant fix. So I think that maybe, maybe we could ask our lovely panelists to talk about some of the challenges, and there are so many, and yet there's nothing else I think they would do. I don't think that any one of these people is going to do anything else with their lives, but it comes at a cost, and I think it might be nice to share some of those challenges that independent bookstore owners face. So, this is not like a complaint fest, but it's just for you to understand. Quick question, how many people in the audience want to run a bookstore? Yes, thank you. Because we need lots of people to run bookstores, but I think maybe it's good to have a reality check. So who'll go first? Krishna?
See, except one or two publisher, most of the publishers are based in Delhi. So they release the books in Delhi first. So nowadays people don't wait for the book. I mean, they are impatient. Now we get the pre-orders. So the book is going to release in Delhi. It takes more than 10 days to come to Bangalore to reach bookworm. It takes more than 10 days. So every day we are keep getting the messages. So it's available there because they put these Delhi booksellers immediately they put it on Insta. So it's available there. So keep getting the messages. But here the publishers are helpless. So we are unable to answer my readers. And importantly, nowadays people cross-check the prices with the online prices. Most of the time, piracy has a deep discount, but readers doesn't know that. So they will check it and they are going to keep it back. So every day we face that actually. And not only that, nowadays Instagrams has a lot of booksellers, but to tell you the truth, those books now which are selling at more than 70%, 80%, they're 100% pirated books. So most of the readers doesn't know the quality of the original books and the piracy books. So these are the important issues we face.
I have a question. What about loyalty? I think bookstores, especially independent bookstores, we have loyal customers who are not going to look only at the price. There are other things they come to the bookstore for. They come to talk to you. They come to look at your selection. They come to meet like-minded people. So don't you think that some part of that gets overcome with loyalty?
That's how we survived actually. So in the time of COVID, and in spite of the unhealthy competition from online, we survived because of our regular customers. So wonderful thing to run a bookshop is, so we meet great people. We have a wonderful conversation with them. We learn from them. And book industry, what I learned from the book industry is that we are the blessed ones. We earn and we learn at the same times actually. So we have from the day one, from last 26 years, we have an option called take it back policy. So that's how we are somehow we are able to run the show. So,
Thank
of course,
you.
Yeah.
What about you, Leonard?
So, at the end of the day, the bookshop is a business, meaning it has to survive, it has to sustain itself, and so you find yourself doing everything. Meaning you have to learn marketing, you have to learn sales, if you are an introvert, you have to learn how to speak to customers, and I think that's the biggest challenge that comes. Meaning it's not just stocking up on the books you like, You have to also be able to sell them. So Rachna was speaking about you've got mail and that bookshop, and you wonder whether that bookshop would have survived in the age of social media, because now it's become a bit easier to get people to know about the kind of books that you're selling, and the kind of, you slowly develop a niche for yourself. Like, you know that if you go to Champaka, you'll get certain kind of books. If you go to any other bookshop, if you go to the bookshop, you'll get another kind of books. So, because I've got calls from 3 people in Bangalore saying I want to open a bookshop, and my answer to that, but is Bangalore is full of bookshops. And no, but in Indira Nagar you don't have a literary fiction bookshop, and so you get these things where the first iteration of a bookshop is your idea of a bookshop, you know. But at the end of the day, it's still a business. You need to know how to run a business. Yeah.
But you raise an important point, and Bangalore is a city of bookstores, and even when I ran my bookstore, it was still a city of bookstores. There were several stores. And like you, every book that I bought had to have a reason to be on the shelf.
Yeah.
We couldn't afford a single book to be dead weight. But I did find that sometimes you were selling out of book. I might have bought 10 copies of it, and there would be more customers than that. So way back then, one phone call to Gangaram's, and I would send my chef, we had a cafe as well, on a cycle to pick up the books. So there was a great kind of relationship between bookstores, and I see that continuing now in Bangalore.
Yeah, no, it's not only happening in Bangalore. I source a lot of my books from Krishna. Like, for example, with what's happening in Palestine, there's an interest of books in that region. And you will be surprised to know that publishers are out of stock for Palestine books. So where do you go? You go to another bookshop and get them. So you must be knowing about the Independent Booksellers Association. Between us there also, we do a lot of bookstores selling, because the customer should not go back without a book. So yeah, we do that a lot, and we make sure that the customer gets the book.
See, Church Street has more than 7 bookshops, but in my personal experience, not only 7 bookshops. Next to me, there are 1,000+ booksellers online I'm going to compete with them, okay, with the 1,000+ booksellers, okay. Still, we have a space for the books actually. I'll tell you my personal experience. In spite of all those sellers in the online, people are unable to find the books because most of the time books will go out of print. So if one customers visit us with a list of 10 books, I'm going to supply only 6-7 books, or sometimes 3-4 books. So obviously he's going to the next bookstore. So book industry is like an ocean. There's a space for everyone.
Was lovely. I have a question for you. So my bookstore, even though it was on Alsu Road, was considered not to be in the city. Alsu Road then was like a faraway place. And I had to do a lot of things to draw people to my store. People wouldn't be walking past my store. I had to find a way for them to come. And therefore, I did a lot of readings. I did jazz every Friday night. We did a children's club, waking up early on a Sunday morning. Not my thing, but we did it just to draw people in. And then I think about Champaka, which is also not amongst the Church Street, MG Road bookstores. They're tucked away. And they found such a space for themselves of customers, of regular readers, of a certain kind of stock that they hold. I'd love to hear about that.
How do we get people in? You know, when we started Chamka, it's at the end of a dead-end road, and I was just like, I don't know if anybody is going to come here. I made like little business models on an Excel sheet. I was like, maybe we'll sell 10 books a month, I don't know. But we were lucky, I think. People found us, and people came. We started with multiple conversations. I think it was a bit frantic in the first year. We had 3 events a week or something like that. I think I wore myself out. But we've calmed down a little bit now, and we have people who come specifically to hear authors at Champaka. We have, or even for signings, people come for the curation that we have. Again, we are a very small store, and we have a limited number of books that we can have at a time. But we've learned a little bit more how to respond to the needs of our customer and how to curate better and better for what they like. So each time they come, they're likely to find something new, something different. We have a whole bunch of recommendations. I mean, we recommend ourselves, but also little notes everywhere telling people, these are the books that we've read and maybe you'd enjoy them too. So we've done many things over the years to start getting people into the store, and I'm happy to say that it worked better than I expected initially.
So Rachna, do you have anything to say about the challenges of being part of the book industry, the retail industry?
I think what my co-panelists and booksellers have said is all very valid, so I won't reiterate that. But I agree with what Leonard and Krishna and Radhika and you have said. To that, I'll add, I think one of our biggest challenges would be rent. At the end of the day, a bookshop always has to be viable. It is a business, and it is primarily for the love of reading, but my parents had to raise a family too, and that has come from the bookshop. So when you actually enter a market, and in many ways, because you're there, you take up the profile of that market, there comes a time that you can't afford it. And often it's because of you. And so unless there's some kind of rent control, you're going to find that if you cannot make a business work, if you're priced out of stores. What I find now, and it's very disturbing, it's a disturbing trend to me, because I'm actually at this point scouting around to open a couple of more bookstores in Delhi, Gurgaon. And in Gurgaon, what I notice is mostly malls. We don't have individual market, not too many, and not that are viable. All the malls that are coming up now only want to sell or rent to brands. So if I were like a Nike or a big recognizable brand, no problem. But if I'm a bookstore, they simply won't rent. So how do I even find space to open a bookstore when I cannot even get into this conversation with the larger malls to rent space? So I think to find a space, forget the business, just finding a space to open a bookstore is going to be challenging. Yeah, I think that to me right now is my biggest challenge. I know that I've been a bookseller for far too long. If it's the only thing I know how to do is to sell the pants of a book, I can do that. I will sell you a book that I love, and you will not be able to resist that. So that's easy.